today we're diving into what it's really like to move into a career in learning and development. And we'll hear from 3 awesome professionals who made the leap into L&D from different paths. They'll share what sparked their transition and how they figured things out. My name is Pamela. I'm a learning experience designer based in Barcelona, and I'm part of the Career Leap core team. I myself made a move into learning and development a few years ago after 8 years in, as a consultancy, as a tech consultant. And I'm really passionate about helping people grow. And I've learned so much from others who were very generous enough to share their journeys with me, just like today's speakers will do with us today. So as I was preparing for this session and I was learning more about each of our speakers, one thing that really stood out was that they are all incredibly generous with their time, with their stories, and their care for others. So whether it's through coaching, community work, or mentoring, they each bring a real sense of purpose to what they do. And I think that will come through in the conversation today. So let me quickly introduce them, but you'll hear much more from them directly in just a moment. So we have Sara Hoxhaj, who moved from recruiting into L&D and now supports people through big life and career transitions as a certified coach and EMCC Senior Practitioner. We have also Melissa Silverio, who transitioned from teaching into corporate L&D, bringing her strengths in inclusive education, curriculum design, and community building. And finally, we have Kate Taylor, a seasoned L&D leader with experience in leadership development, compliance, and strategic learning, who recently started a new job at Opta. So congratulations for that, Kate. So this is a very relaxed and informal conversation. We don't have any slides, no presentations. This is just a real talk about how people have found their way into this field. So to our audience out there, I want to ask you to feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time, because we'd love to hear what you're curious about and that you bring your voices into the mix. So once more, thank you, Kate, Sara, and Melissa for being here. And I'll just start with our conversation, if that's okay. Okay, so let me start maybe with you, Sara, just in the order I introduced you. So to kick us off, can you briefly tell us what you're doing now in L&D? And looking back, what's one clue from your earlier career that hinted you'd end up here, even if you didn't realize it at the time?
First of all, thank you, Pamela, for organizing this. And thank you to everyone for...
We cannot hear you. Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Apologies.
No problem. So I was just saying thank you, Pamela. So I want you to hear that for setting that up. And thank you to everyone who is basically spending 1 hour of their day talking to all us 3. As Pamela introduced, I'm Sara. I'm based in Berlin, in Germany, but I'm originally from Albania. For those of you that don't know Albania, don't worry, it's a small country, so it's fine. Yeah, what am I currently doing? I'm L&D specialist at the moment and also leadership and career transition coach. And that's my second transition into the field. My first one was into L&D. My background is in recruitment. And then I figured out that my passion wasn't there, the development part wasn't there, and that's the development part that has been continuously pushing me to come to this position where I'm now, where I'm building my coaching business and also my L&D consultancy on the side. I would say that back when I started my journey into the professional work, because I don't like the word career, the one thing that showed that I'm going full cycle in my journey right now was the fact that I was always involved in initiatives that had to do with supporting either students in their development or how the learning was being done, what they needed from like high school to later on in my studies. And I decided that psychology would be not my major, but my minor, even though I was studying economics on the other side. So I was always very interested in the behavioral part of things and how those support people to grow forward. Yeah, and that came forward later in recruitment when sometimes I would recruit for a role and I would tell people, okay, you don't fit here, but maybe we can do a coaching of where you would fit better. So that showed up continuously in my career.
Sorry, I was muted. So thank you so much, Sara, for sharing a bit about you. So next, I'm gonna ask Melissa to share with us.
Hi, everyone. Same for me. I'm so grateful to be here and share a little bit about my professional journey. So I'm Melissa. I'm currently calling out of a suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I started my professional journey as a high school teacher, so a secondary teacher. And so I taught uh, high school, secondary social studies. The American school system is a crazy place. And so I wanted to take my skill set and move into the corporate world. And so about 3.5 years ago now, I made the transition into corporate L&D. So aside from that, I also work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm also currently a co-leader of an international employee resource group for the queer community. So yeah, corporate L&D has given me a great opportunity to transition those skills and also make a difference in the community at work. Currently, I work as a corporate trainer, and what I essentially do is I design learning programs and teach people how to do their jobs.
Yeah. So maybe you can share the clue from your earlier career that hinted you would end up here.
Yeah. There was no clue for a long time. I wanted to be a teacher. I made the decision when I was 7 because I loved learning so much. I think the clue started to happen when I realized I was getting to spend less time in actual instruction and a lot more time in classroom management. So I loved my students. I had a great experience, but I really wanted to focus on the learning aspect and the coaching aspect. To be fair, I was also a teacher during the pandemic. So during lockdown, I was a teacher. I've been doing virtual relationship building and connecting pretty much since. So yeah, I wanted an opportunity to do all of the things I learned how to do in school. And it's really nice because now my students are paid to be there. So I don't have to worry about them doing my assignments.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I know from interactions in the community and, people I've known that there's a lot of teachers looking to do this leap into corporate L&D. So I'm sure that experience will be very valuable.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. And Kate, finally, please introduce yourself.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so my name's Kate and I am based in Dublin in Ireland, but I'm originally from the UK and I've moved around a bit before I settled here. And yeah, huge thanks to you all dialing in. I was seeing in the chat that we have everywhere from Sydney, I think was the furthest east, and Texas the furthest west, and everything in between. So that's amazing. We're really a 24-hour call here, aren't we? So thank you for being here. My journey, I started out my career as an accountant. I always laugh because I was a terrible accountant. I did a psychology degree at university, came out of university with no idea what I wanted to do. It was just after the global financial crash and I just needed a job and I wanted to pay the bills, and I somehow managed to secure myself a graduate place at one of the big 4 firms and qualified as an accountant. And 4 years later, I was just thinking, this is so not for me. And gradually, incrementally, by offering to volunteer with graduate onboarding programs and volunteering to speak at training events about the boring accounting stuff, I realized that was my gig. I wanted to talk about it more than I wanted to do it. And I wanted to share my knowledge rather than actually sit and look at spreadsheets. So gradually over time, I moved into a formal compliance and risk training role. And then I crept again and ended up working sort of doing more professional development as well as technical skills. And now I find myself in my new job this week. I started on Monday. So today is day 4 of my new job. I've sneaked out for an hour to run this session. Now I'm looking after the whole breadth of L&D at Okta for EMEA. So I'm looking after everything from onboarding to leadership development, manager development programs, performance management training, and really partnering with the business to drive business outcomes through that. So that's been my journey.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kate. And I can relate to that feeling of, something is not right. So yeah, I'm hoping we can hear more about that in the next minutes. So we have a question in the chat from Lizanne Prince, who says, who is directed to Melissa, I assume. So it says, apart from the clear difference of target group, what was the biggest difference between education and corporate L&D in your experience?
Sure. Thank you for the question. This is a passion of mine, talking about teachers moving into corporate learning and development because they're so prepared to do so. Teachers are one-person shows. So that was the biggest difference moving in, apart from some more of the culture, like corporate culture things that I'll talk about later. As a teacher, at least in the States. So remember, I'm a teacher in the United States, so this may be different across the globe. But you do everything yourself. You decide how to do your lessons. You create everything. You work with other members in your department. You are a therapist. You are a part-time parent. You are prepared to make strategic decisions. You know how to do individual development plans because you do that with your students. The biggest difference in corporate L&D is you may not have creative control. So you may not be doing every part of the teaching job. So for example, part of teaching may be getting your students to adapt to a new program or software. And that is one facet of the job. That may be your entire job. If you join corporate, you could be an implementation specialist. You could be a change manager. Working in proper corporate L&D, so learning and development, like with my fellow corporate trainer team, we also have instructional designers. So I was an instructional designer as a teacher. I had to create and design all of the materials that I used. Now that's delegated to a different position. So I would say the biggest difference between education and corporate L&D is you have to, as a teacher, be prepared to delegate a large amount of the responsibilities that you're used to taking. That can be great. It can also be really weird because you're used to having creative control. But that'll be part of more of what I talk about, the transition process. But yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about this, because teachers are really so prepared to do so many different things.
Thank you so much for that, Melissa. So before I tackle the questions that are coming up in the chat, let me ask something else before, and then I'll go back to those. Yes, Sara, go ahead, please.
I just didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to build something on what Melissa said, if it's helpful, because I was working on an online language learning company in my last position when it comes to L&D, and normally their product is for students, meaning people who want to learn a language in this case. So we would work with teachers. And there, what I realized that was fascinating that might be helpful to answer the question is that there were 3 parts really acting on the learning and the development part in that company. One part was who was like the internal learning and development specialist. That's something to maybe be helpful on that creativity that Melissa mentioned. And on that role, I'm doing everything from A to Z because I'm a one-person team. But then you have also the teachers department who basically teach the language in this case, and they do not have the creative freedom actually that they would normally have in a teaching position, because most of their decisions are done by an internal team who deals with all the elements of learning for the students. So things such as the curriculum, the instructional designers that Melissa was mentioning. And what was really interesting in those positions is, first of all, how much you can interact as an internal learning and development specialist with this part of the business, who's more external because it's facing the client. And secondly, how much its bridges are needed on that position. So as Melissa mentioned, they had clear responsibilities, especially the more the company grows, the more specific that position is going to look like. But once they go down in silos, that doesn't help them. So they were looking to hire then learning experience designers. So people who would actually connect all these parts of the learning and have a little bit more of creative freedom in that case. So that's something that I wanted to bring on the difference between the corporate, because there are corporates that deal with learning, so there might be a different setup in that case.
Great.
That's a great point, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So I want to remind our audience that, this conversation is about that transition that people had done into L&D and corporate L&D. So if you would like to know more about this experience, I encourage you to ask those kinds of questions in the chat, just to remember the overall topic. The next question I have is, maybe you can share with us, what did it feel like to say, I decided it, I'm moving into L&D?
Shall I take that one to start? I think,
Please, Kate, I was going to say.
yeah, I think for me, I moved from a very different industry into L&D, and I think I went from something that was seen as very traditional, very credible. You tell your parents you're becoming an accountant and they're so proud of you, because it's a proper job with a long-term career path. And then you say you're moving into learning and development, which maybe for some people, like especially your parents, if they're, a bit more old school, they're like, well, what's that? Like, what do you mean you just teach people? Like, what do you teach them? What do you do? Like, how do you teach them that if you're not the expert in that area? And it's a little bit more vague and wishy-washy. And so to really get them to buy into what you're doing and to understand what you're doing is a lot more difficult. So I think to say to someone, I'm an accountant, well, they know what you do straight away. To say to someone, I'm an L&D specialist, they're like, huh? For who? How come? You've just started working for as a security software company, but you didn't do that before. How can you do that now? So I think explaining to people what you do can be a bit more lengthy. But I think if you understand your why, if you really understand why you're doing it and why you're passionate about it, like I love helping people. I love seeing that moment in the classroom where they go, oh, I get it, or oh, this is actually interesting. I thought it was boring this morning, but I'm walking out thinking it's really interesting now. I think if you can find that why and that bit about the job that really sparks you, and you can communicate that to other people, I think they'll see it in you. They'll see your eyes light up when you talk about it, and they'll go, oh, that makes sense as to why you've moved into that. And I get that suits you. That's the right place for you. So I think there can be judgment depending on what career you move into. I think as well, if the people on this call are looking to move into a different into L&D from a different space, I think it's never too late is another thing. I think sometimes, you hit your 30s or your 40s and you go, oh God, do I really want to change career when I've spent so long building credibility in this space? And actually, you know, we're all going to be working until we're in our 60s at least, maybe even our 70s. And so I think you've got so long ahead of you in your career as well. Is like, don't let people's thoughts about it turn you off the idea of making a bold leap into something that you're passionate about, because you'll enjoy life more when you do a job that inspires you.
Mm. Yeah. Anyone would like to add on that, or maybe share their own experience about how did you feel like moving into L&D?
I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. When I was leaving teaching, I had no idea what was available in the corporate L&D field. I actually just answered a question in the chat. I think someone asked, what are the job options in L&D? Seems like a huge field. How did you uncover this? Thank you, Lacey. That was very overwhelming because there are so many positions that had to do with the exact skills that I was using, and I was applying for all of them and praying it worked out well. So, you know, I wasn't sure, should I go into, you know, just facilitating because I was comfortable with facilitating for such a long time as a part of school days. Should I go into corporate training where, you know, I'm making some of it, training some of it, but the instructional designers were more taking on the modularization. So like, if you're familiar with like Articulate, Camtasia, stuff like that, where the instructional designers, focus less on the facilitation. And I didn't know the difference between any of these. So I was just kind of throwing as many applications out into the wind, and had no preparation. When you go from school teaching, your career looks like something you've seen before because you've been a student in school. So you kind of know how schools work. You kind of know, the same way the general public does. We've all gone through school. When you jump into corporate after being so prepared for your workplace, you have no idea what lay on the other side. So I was very, very scared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I will say I'm on the job hunt right now. And I'm sure Sara, you absolutely would have perspectives on this, but it is much easier going through the different positions now, having an idea what they do. But I will also say, you know, when I was listening to Sara, some of her organizational experience that she was talking about is different from my company's experience. My company is really large. Um, so I will say a corporate trainer or a training specialist at one company, the scope of their role may be completely different than the training specialist or corporate trainer at another company. So then there's even more diversity of experience.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with the terrifying feelings. That's why I was just all in. I think for me, at some point, and I say that now in my second transition, at some point, this passion felt like it was not a passion anymore, but just a thing that I had to do because the focus got into trying to find a job. And being able to reconnect back to my passion about learning and development and what that means actually was very helpful in that process of easing those terrifying feelings, and what this means for me, really. And I would agree that I had no idea whatsoever about all the different parts of L&D and organizations, depending on what place they are, what funding they have, what focus they have very different focuses on L&D, and require a title can mean so many different things from one place to another. I think for me, what was even more overwhelming is because this was exactly the period when I joined the L&D Shakers community. And then I would like just sit and read in the chat everything that people were asking. And I would hear all these buzzwords and I was like, what are these? And why is everybody talking about an LMS? And what is an LMS? And how does it work? And I think what really helped me is trying to narrow it down instead of making it bigger. Like start from one place, experiment 2, 3 days on it, like read about it, try to understand some things and be okay with the feeling of you don't know this, but you're getting some knowledge, because that proved very helpful later on when I would interview.
Great, thank you so much. There's we are starting to have questions in the chat, so I'm gonna bring some of them, and maybe Kate, you can help us answer this. So Shruti is asking, in situations where you're tasked with designing a training program for a subject outside of your area of expertise, how do you balance effectively structuring the content and ensuring its accuracy while also maintaining engagement and credibility with learners? What strategies or resources would you recommend for overcoming such challenges?
Well, thank you for the question, Shruti. It's definitely something that you will come across depending on the type of company you work in. I remember in my first L&D role, I was working with KPMG and I was asked to devise a workshop on a brand new regulation that I knew nothing about. It was new privacy regulation. And they said, okay, you're in training. Can you train everyone on that? And I said, no, I'm not a specialist. I'm not the subject matter expert. I can help you to plan out the session. I can think about the learning principles that are going to drive success. Like, what are the outcomes that you want to achieve through this session? Do you want people to just have knowledge of the new regulation? Do you want them to know how to apply it to a risk assessment? Do you want them to be able to go and communicate it back to their clients? Like, what's the outcome that we need from this workshop? And then once you understand the ultimate goal, you need to think about, well, who's going to help me do that? Because I'm not the expert. Do we have somebody in the company who's the expert? If we do, we're going to leverage them and they need to buy into this. So you need to now go and speak to them. And if it's, if you don't have the network in the company, start talking, sharing, understanding who can help you to get that stakeholder buy-in. So if you've got experts in the company, use them. They're there to be used. That it's a very important part of their role as well. So explain like the what's in it for them by them helping you to deliver and design this workshop. If you don't have the expertise in the company, then you need to start thinking externally. Do you have budget to bring in an expert? If you don't have budget, is there enough resource online, in books, in articles, in podcasts, in videos on YouTube for you to pull all these different parts together to build something that's going to be valuable? Because you don't want to stand at the front of a classroom and just regurgitate one article that you read on Harvard Business Review that everybody could have done themselves. So you need to be adding value. You need to say, I've curated all of this amazing content from different places that's really going to summarize this perfectly for you. But I think making sure that you don't pitch yourself as the expert whenever you're asked to run a training course. People will ask you to do X, Y, and Z, and you say, okay, I can help you build this. I can help make sure it hits the mark in terms of the learning objectives, but I'm not your specialist, and we're going to need people. So being really clear, and I just responded to another question in the chat. I said, don't be an order taker and don't be a yes person, because that will happen. People will come to you and say, I want a course on this. I want a workshop on that. I want a fun offsite game. And it's like, hang on, I'm not a children's entertainer. I'm a professional. I'm here to partner with you and drive business outcomes. So I'm not just going to say yes to everything. It has to be aligned to the business, and they have to be willing to put in resources if they don't have them there on site in the company. So I hope that helps, Shruti, answer your question. And I see others nodding along. So if anybody wants to add anything.
Oh my gosh, brilliant, Kate. Everything you just said, when I read that question is what I was thinking. I also love how you kind of used Sarah's idea there, where instead of making it bigger, you made it narrower. And you made it narrower around the objectives. That's so key. We're not looking to teach them about this. Something you learn in, I have a bachelor's in education. Something you learn there is it's not about what they're doing. You don't want them to do something. My objective is to have them do this course. Maybe your objective is to raise engagement. That's another thing. But what do you want them to be able to do at the end of it? I really related to the question too, because when I joined corporate L&D, my content that I train on now is business licensing. So like licensing compliance for different businesses. I had no idea what that was. It's kind of also a niche industry. I had been taking history courses and, politics and geography for years, and here I am. I have all of the L&D background, none of the content. I don't know where I would be without my very trusty SMEs, the subject matter experts. And just to add to what Kate said at the very end there, don't pretend to be the expert, completely co-sign that. I will be very candid. In the beginning, when I was still getting a handle on the concepts of what is this field, but also like the programs and systems, I had never used an order management system. I, with their permission, will actually tell my trainees, go to the SMEs that are on the floor with you. You may be sitting next to someone. You may be constantly in chats with, a senior customer service representative who's done this for 5 years. So you can even frame it as, I am going to teach you the best practices, the foundational principles. I'm going to teach you how to use the systems. And then use the other resources, because that's a great thing about corporate L&D. There are typically other people who can help you, even in a very small company. So yeah, I was just nodding right along. I also laughed because I was a children's character entertainer, so that made me laugh. If you work in entertainment, you have a role in L&D as well.
Mhm. Thank you. I can see that the speakers are kindly answering your questions on the chat. So for those questions who have been answered in the chat, I won't be bringing them up. The next one that I can see, Sara just answered. So I'm gonna skip that one. So maybe I see there are a lot of.
Pamela, I'll just add on to the question that Elizabeth
Yes,
so Elizabeth, I'll just read it out in case you can't see it in the chat. So Elizabeth asked, I'm curious which strategies for all of you have been most instrumental during your transition early on. Sara answered about being curious, definitely. I think as well, find yourself a couple of champions. If you're in a bigger organization, find yourself a couple of champions who can really see what you want to do and see sort of your goal and where you're trying to go with learning and development, and people who are going to support you in that. So from my own experience, when I was with KPMG, I started out being a specialist compliance trainer that was taking my accounting and finance background, teaching on compliance points, but quite quickly I saw that there was a gap in that company for professional skills training. We were a smaller KPMG office overseas, and there wasn't really much provided in terms of soft skills, whether it was giving and receiving feedback or crucial conversations, those sort of sessions, there wasn't much. And I had a really great relationship with the CEO of the company, and we were at a corporate drinks event one evening, and I said to him, Mike, I think I can do something really good with professional development training. Will you give me a chance? Can I run like a couple of lunch and learns? Nobody will be taking time away from their desks. It'll just be at lunchtime. There's no cost to the business. Just let me run a couple of workshops, see how they go. And if you like them, then maybe we can think about expanding my role into more of a soft skills piece. And he was like, okay, yeah, no problem. You work with marketing to set up the plan and do it. And so he was a real champion of me having the opportunity to try things out. So I think if you try and do something alone, it's going to be hard. If you start to sort of build a team of supporters around you in the business, and people that will say, oh yeah, she can do that, or let's give her a try. Let's see if she can do it, or let's see if it makes a difference. I think you're going to feel more supported and more confident in what you do than if you're just putting yourself out there alone. So I think finding some champions and some partners within the business that can really have your back is really key as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So next we have a question from Janka Planki. I hope I'm pronouncing it good. And she asks, what areas of L&D and what size of firms are open to transferable skills? Ideally, I love to avoid starting an entry-level role, as I already have 8+ years of experience in finance and consultancy. And maybe you can tie this to your own experience of what skills were transferable when you leaped into L&D.
Maybe I can say something here, because for me, it wasn't the size, with my experience, it wasn't really the size of firms that really made a difference. I think it was really the hiring manager, and how open they were to seeing those skills that you are bringing. And that can be, if you're in a big organization, that can be just connecting to that hiring manager and telling them the job that you've been doing. But I was switching companies. So I wasn't in a big company before. What I wanted to do was not really possible. So I had to look somewhere else for what I wanted to do. And I think for me, it was mostly those soft skills that really supported me. And I didn't start from an entry-level role. I started sort of mid-level where I was, because the hiring manager was able to see those skills of such as analytical, how you approach problem solving, how you basically maybe build a hypothesis and test those hypotheses before jumping to conclusions, or how you're being curious to have a conversation, what type of questions you are asking. And if you can show those in your previous role in the projects that you've been doing while you interview, because I know CV is the first step, but especially while you interview, that proved very, very helpful for me. The second thing that proved very helpful was, as I said earlier, just researching. There were a bunch of things that I didn't know, but when I would apply for a job, for example, and see those keywords, I would just go and see what did that actually mean, and did I have any experience with that in some sort of form, whichever that was, either through a colleague or through a volunteering project I had done or through my previous work. How had I maybe tried these things out that were being said on the job description, but were being said in an L&D context only?
And I would add to that, Sarah, thank you so much. Janka, I see in your question that you said you have 8+ years of finance and consulting experience. So just to loop back to what I said earlier about when you're not the expert in something. So if I'm in L&D in your company and I'm running a new manager training program and I want some experienced managers to come and talk in that program, I want you to volunteer. So if you're a manager in the finance department but you want to come and work in learning and development, come to me and say, hey, Kate, I see that you run a new manager training program. Can I come in as an experienced manager and talk to them? And I'm like, I would be delighted if people did that with me. Like if people came to me and said, I'd like to speak at your trainings, I'd be like, yes, because I spend my life chasing people to speak at my trainings. So maybe if you're currently in a role, and I don't know everybody's unique job situations, but if you're currently in a company and you're not in a learning and development function, but you see there are other training programs going on, go to the training program owners and say, is there an opportunity for me to speak? You know, if you're a people manager and it's an opportunity to talk about giving feedback to your team members or about, running team offsites or whatever it is, take your skills now and offer to share them in a learning context, because then you can add that to your CV or your resume and say, I run workshops for X amount of people about this. There you go. You've ticked a big L&D box, even though you're not an L&D professional. So volunteering to support with existing L&D initiatives, even if you're not in L&D, means that you can write those on your resume now, and you're not lying. You really did it. So I think that would be another tip from me on that front.
Yeah. To add to that, I mean, again, so much of when I hear the question, Kate and Sarah are covering it. So it's lovely to be in company with similar professionals. So much of getting a job outside of where you may be coming from is confidence. A very American saying is fake it till you make it, fake the confidence until it shows up somewhere another time. But imposter syndrome is poison when it comes to jumping industries. So much of what Kate said, you do have the experience. It may not be titled as that experience, but find the transferable skills within your own resume. And if you're applying to jobs, a great thing you can do is add that to your cover letter. Think about those transferable skills and sell them in your cover letter. Sell them in your resume bio. I definitely see that happening. I'll also say Finding an L&D position within your skill set is actually some organizations prefer that. So some organizations, especially in pharmaceutical, healthcare, even I see in, business to business, sales, software as a service, some companies would rather have someone who has that content subject matter expert background and the transferable L&D skills. And some organizations, you can come in kind of the way I did with none of those content pieces, but having the L&D skills. So it's also about like finding the right environment for you. I believe I saw some folks in the chat who are also on the job hunt with me. And so that's the best advice that I can give. Within the past 7 weeks, I have interviewed for 4 different companies, still looking for the right role for me because they are all different. But that's the traction that you can get. And that's the traction you can get from using those skills. So believe that you have them and sell it. And I see, Lysanne said, I think the danger of really wanting to transition into a certain field is not being as critical of, for example, whether the culture or way of working the company is you're applying at. Please, do you have tips on how to balance the please hire me, I'll do anything feeling? I'm there with you, Lysanne. I'm there with you. That kind of relates to it too, company culture. Sometimes you might not be the right person for the job, and it has nothing to do with your skill set. So also steel yourself. Tap into your inner confidence. They may have a couple of people on the team already who offer a lot of the same skills and personality that you do. And so they may be looking for something different. And that has nothing to do with what you would bring to the role. If anyone else has done theater, performing arts, that can help too. That helps too, because you are used to being denied or rejected because of potentially something cosmetic. I'm 5'8". I didn't get roles because I wasn't shorter than the boy I was auditioning with, and it's nothing personal. So that's part of it too. Try not to take things too personally if that it's really compatibility. It's not just about your skill set. Sara, I know you're helping people transition, so I wonder if you have anything to add about that sort of skill set and compatibility and finding the right fit.
I think I would go back to what you mentioned, Melissa. I think it's very important to realize this is not about you, that rejection is not about you. So if you keep on thinking that you're the main variable in the equation, you're probably not. And I know it might seem we are not in the best economic situation. So I know a lot of you might be in that boat right now as well. And it is very helpful to reframe those ways of how you're thinking about a situation. What are you actually telling yourself? That you won't find a job, that you're not good enough? What is that voice exactly trying to say? And don't push it away. Just that voice is trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you that it wants to protect you from a potential thing that could come in the future. It's not wrong. Just accept that voice, and as a result, say to it that you hear it. And what can you do for it, really? You don't want to control maybe the whole situation and continuously applying in a frenetic way. Maybe you want to set your own boundaries of how you show yourself up in an interview, to what jobs you apply, to what do you like to ask really, or how you ask the questions. Set your own boundaries when you're interviewing as well, to feed those parts of yourself that can be more accepted and feel better rather than always giving externally.
Yeah.
I wanted to add too, if that's okay, Pamela. Sorry, I think I might have just interrupted you.
Yeah, please go ahead. And we will move into the next question after your intervention.
Thank you. I also just wanted to add about mentors, because so much of what we're talking about, transitioning from a space that you maybe don't feel as confident yet, that you maybe don't feel that you have a specific skill set. I am the professional that I am today because of my professional mentors, period. I saw someone who was maybe didn't have the L&D background. So this person was a trainer who was training me on how to do the role, but did not have the L&D background. So like the assignments weren't there, the differentiated instruction, but he handled the corporate world so well. I didn't know how to talk in meetings. I didn't know when it was my turn to talk in meetings, and I definitely messed up sometimes. Um, you can learn so much from just observation and finding like an inside thoughts person, somebody that you can be a little messy with and ask some what you may consider to be like stupid questions that you can vent frustration. Watch them. You can learn so much from just observing people and how they behave strategically. He gave me the best professional advice that I've been given to date, and it's two-pronged. Assume positive intent and approach from a place of curiosity. So yeah, I would not be where I am without my professional mentors. And you can find them in groups like this, like L&D Shakers. I've already met so many people who do such incredible work. You can find them at your own organization. LinkedIn is also great for suggesting people in your field. Part of this transition is you have to be extroverted. You have to be proactive. Shouldn't say extroverted, proactive. You have to go out there and get it. So reach out to folks on LinkedIn, even if you don't know who they are. You'd be surprised how many people feel the way that Kate and Sara and I feel, passionate. I'm currently in this emerging leaders course. It's hosted by Eager Labs, and it's typically $1,000 seat. And I connected with someone on LinkedIn who had people help her while she was climbing the ladder. And she paid it forward and gave me a seat to this incredible class, this incredible course. And that was just through making a connection and striking up a conversation. So seek help and be proactive, reach out for it.
Mm.
And I definitely echo that. I can see there's loads of questions coming up in the chat. Now I'm a terrible multitasker, and I'm trying to listen to the conversations and also read and answer questions in the chat. And I know I'm not going to get to them all. So again, like if after this session, find me on LinkedIn, add me, ask me your questions there, because I know that we won't get, we're nearly, 9 minutes left and there's so much still to cover. So we're here because we want to help people on this journey. So I'm sure if there's anything after the fact, I just want to say that now before we get to time. But Pamela, sorry, carry on.
No, thank you. That's so kind. And I'm in the job hunt team as well, so this is very, very useful for me too. And coming back to your experience, and I see some people are thinking about what do I need, to land my next job. And I wanted to ask, based on your experience, when you were doing that leap, where did you feel most unprepared, and how did you bridge that gap?
I'll jump in then, and I think there's been a few questions about it on the sidebar there about qualifications. Because I came from an area where if you had the qualification, you were seen as competent, and if you didn't, you were not. Like, I am a qualified chartered accountant, therefore I can do your accounts. Now, I would not have trusted me with your accounts because I was not good. But then I moved into training and learning and development, and suddenly I was doing it, but I felt like I was winging it. I was like, I don't have any letters next to my name that certify that I'm qualified to do this. And so I was doing it and I was doing a good job, but I felt for my own confidence and for other people to have confidence in me, it would have been nice to have a certification. So I was very fortunate that my company funded me. And there was a question on the sidebar about which certificates are best. It varies across jurisdiction. I know that in Europe, the CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, is I probably even just said the wrong name there, CIPD though. And they would be seen as very prestigious in Europe, but I know in the US it might be the AATD maybe. I don't know, different bodies in different jurisdictions, so definitely do your research on that. But I think if you can get a certificate under your belt, it would be great. There are really expensive ones. The diploma, for example, the diploma that I did was something like 4,000 or 5,000 euros, but there are certificates that you can do that are smaller and shorter. Maybe they take 2 weeks to do and they cost 500 euros. And I know that's still not cheap. We live in a cost of living crisis, but you're getting those letters somewhere on your resume so that then actually, if your resume goes through an AI automated filtering system, those letters are there. You're not getting straight into the reject pile because those letters weren't mentioned, because that's what companies are doing. They're getting hundreds of applications, and you need to make sure that there are certain words and certain phrases that are keeping you in that to look at pile for the talent acquisition partner. So even if it's a small certificate, it's not the big diploma you want to do. Get those letters somewhere in your CV, or even mention them, say looking into doing this, even, get those keywords in the resume so that it stays in the system as somebody who's meeting those requirements. And then once you're in the door, then maybe you'll get the support to do the more expensive qualification later down the line. Because that was for me. I got in the door and then the company paid for it for me. So in terms of formal qualifications, I think that's a way to do it, because I know they're not cheap at all.
I'm going to offer a different path. Any Americans on the call and have copious student loans, you may not be able to do something like that. Although if you can, you should. Because also we're all here because we likely think that learning is fun. So if you can do that, if you're like me, we won't talk about my student loan payments, but that is a little out of my budget right now. Again, make connections. So making connections can really help if you, not just reaching out to someone and saying, "Hi, my name's Melissa. I just applied for your job. Hire me, please." Look at their bio and try to make connections based on who they are as a person. Make a real connection. And that way, even if it's not this job at their company, they may think of you because they may have a friend of a friend who's a talent acquisition specialist and is looking for something that you do. And they remember you because you guys went to the same school. Or, maybe something that I would bring up is, if Kate is living in Dublin, maybe I would ask her about living there because I've always wanted to visit. But even things like that, even if you haven't actually shared that experience. One more thing I wanted to add from Kate was the buzzwords. So unfortunately, this is just the nature of the job market right now, because especially for remote roles, there are so many applicants. They are likely some are feeding your resumes through the like an ATS feeder and looking for those buzzwords. And so look at the job description. Look at the buzzwords in the job description: design, collaborate with cross-functional teams, and reflect that in your resume and however you've done it. Something else that's really important about resume writing, at least that has been in my experience, which when I made this change, I started getting way more hits. Don't just write what you've done, write how you've done it really well. They're going to look at a bunch of people who have said, collaborated with cross-functional teams, designed modules for corporate L&D team. You want to show how you've done what you can do well. So think about the numbers. What was your engagement rate the last time you tried something? How many different teams have you collaborated with, and what has been generated from that? So don't just focus on what you can do. Talk about what you've done and how you did it exceptionally. Also, how is it 8:50 or 8:57 to me, but how has it been an hour?
I know. I prepared so many questions that were left unanswered because of time, but it's good because we had people raising their own. So yeah, we're about to finish, and I just wanted to, maybe take the last minutes just to invite you to join the L&D Shakers community. You can do it through the LinkedIn profile, the page. So make sure to join there. And if you're already part of the Slack channel, make sure to look for the Career Leap channel. So you can join. We will be, communicating through that chat. Once more, I want to thank so much Kate, Sara, and Melissa for their time. It was really insightful, and I think I learned a lot. And I'm sure all of us, got a lot from this. Yes, so thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Yes, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
If I may say something to everyone,
Go ahead.
besides thank you for the time, is that the same way that I said to Lucian, I'm offering currently a couple of free sessions for people who are interested in doing transitions. Not only career, life is full of transitions of whatever type. So if you feel that it would be helpful for you to talk about some of those things that you're telling yourself and are not helping you in interviews, like you're not good enough or this is never going to happen, then just reach out. You should be able to have my LinkedIn, but if not, then I'm very sure if you reach out to Pamela, she will give you my LinkedIn or something else.
For sure, for sure. Thank you for that offering, Sara. That's very kind. So yes, thank you everyone, and hope to see you in the next sessions in Career Leap.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.